They thought she was trash. They thought she was a gold digger, trapping their son with a pregnancy. On a freezing Christmas Eve, Beatrice Halloway threw her pregnant daughter-in-law out onto the streets of Boston without a coat, laughing as she slammed the heavy oak door. She thought she had won. She thought she had saved the family fortune. But Beatrice made one fatal mistake. She didn't check who her daughter-in-law actually was. She didn't know that the shivering woman carrying twins wasn't looking for money. She was the secret sole heir to the Davenport Empire, a fortune that could buy the Halloway family 10 times over. And revenge. Revenge is best served cold. The grandfather clock in the hallway of the Halloway estate chimed 7 times, the sound echoing off the marble floors like a death knell. Outside, the Boston winter was unforgiving. A blizzard had been raging since noon, burying the manicured hedges of Beacon Hill in distinct icy drifts. But inside the library, the atmosphere was even colder. Vivian Clark stood near the fireplace, though she felt no warmth. Her hands were instinctively wrapped around her swollen belly. She was 7 months pregnant, carrying twins, and her back ached with a dull, throbbing persistence that she had learned to ignore over the last year of her marriage. Across the room, sitting in a high-backed leather chair that looked like a throne, was Beatrice Halloway. The matriarch of the Halloway textile dynasty held a glass of sherry, her eyes scanning Vivian with the kind of disdain usually reserved for a stain on a silk rug. "You really thought you could pull this off, didn't you?" Beatrice asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Vivian blinked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I don't understand, Beatrice. Pull what off? I'm just waiting for Preston to come home." "Preston isn't coming home to you," Beatrice snapped, setting the glass down hard enough to threaten the crystal coaster. She reached into the folder on her lap and tossed a stack of photographs onto the Persian rug at Vivian's feet. Vivian couldn't bend down easily, but she didn't have to. The photos were large, glossy, and brutal. They showed her husband, Preston Halloway, the man who had sworn to love her in sickness and in health, walking out of the Ritz-Carlton. On his arm was Charlene Croft, the daughter of a rival shipping magnate. In one photo, Preston was kissing Charlene's hand. In another, they were looking at engagement rings. The air left Vivian's lungs. This has to be a mistake. We're having children. Twins. He was just at the ultrasound last week. He was at the ultrasound to ensure the assets were healthy, nothing more, Beatrice sneered. Let's be realistic, Vivian. You were a barista when he found you. A nobody. A charity case. We tolerated you because Preston was going through a rebellious phase. But now the Halloway stock is dipping. We need a merger with the Crofts, and Charlene doesn't want baggage. Beatrice stood up, smoothing her skirt. You are the baggage. The cruelty was so sharp, so calculated, that Vivian couldn't even cry. She felt a strange numbness spreading through her limbs. He's my husband. Not for long, Beatrice said, signaling to the butler, a man named Arthur, who looked genuinely pained to be witnessing this. Arthur, bring her coat. Actually, don't bother. She won't need it where she's going. Beatrice, it's 10 degrees below zero. Vivian whispered, her voice trembling. You can't throw me out. Not tonight. It's Christmas Eve. I can do whatever I please in my house. Beatrice hissed, stepping close, her perfume, a cloying scent of lavender and old money filling Vivian's nose. You signed a prenuptial agreement. You get nothing. No alimony. No access to the estate. And as for those children, if they are indeed Preston's, which I doubt, we will send a lawyer for a paternity test when they are born. Until then, you are trespassing. The heavy oak doors of the library creaked open. Preston walked in. Vivian's heart leaped. "Preston, tell her. Tell her she's crazy." Preston Halloway stopped at the doorway. He looked handsome in his cashmere coat, snow dusting his shoulders. He looked at his mother, then at the photos on the floor, and finally at his pregnant wife. His eyes didn't hold love. They held inconvenience. "Vivian." Preston sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Don't make a scene. Mother is right. The merger with Charlene, it's vital for the company. We've grown apart. You know that." "Grown apart?" Vivian's voice cracked. "I'm carrying your sons." "Take this," Preston said, pulling a check from his pocket and tossing it onto the table near the door. "It's $10,000. That should cover a motel and the hospital bill. After that, you're on your own." "I don't want your money," Vivian said, a sudden spark of fire igniting in her belly, fueled by the twins kicking. "I want to know how you can sleep at night." "I sleep on Egyptian cotton," Beatrice interrupted. "Now get out." Beatrice grabbed Vivian's arm. Her grip was ironclad. She dragged the pregnant woman toward the front door. Vivian stumbled, catching herself on the frame. The cold wind from the open door bit into her skin immediately. "Arthur, throw her bag out," Beatrice commanded. A small duffel bag, packed hastily by the staff, landed in the snow. "Preston, please," Vivian cried out one last time, looking back at the man she had loved. Preston turned his back and poured himself a drink. Beatrice shoved Vivian. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a physical push. Vivian slipped on the icy stoop, barely catching the railing to prevent a fall that could have killed her babies. She landed on her knees in the snow, the cold instantly soaking through her thin maternity leggings. "If you come back," Beatrice shouted over the howling wind, "I'll have you arrested for extortion. Disappear, trash." The massive door slammed shut. The sound was final. The lock clicked. Vivian was alone. The street was empty. The Christmas lights on the neighbors' houses twinkled mockingly. She shivered violently, her teeth chattering, but she didn't reach for the check Preston had left inside. She didn't bang on the door. She stood up, wiping the snow from her knees. She looked at the closed door of the Halloway mansion, her eyes hardening. "You want me to disappear?" She whispered to the wind. "Fine. But when I come back, you won't be dealing with the barista. You'll be dealing with the owner." She reached into her bra, pulling out a small, warm locket. Inside wasn't a picture of Preston. It was a picture of a man the world thought was dead, Jonathan Davenport, the oil and tech tycoon who had vanished 20 years ago. Her father. She walked into the storm, not as Vivian Halloway, but as Vivian Davenport. 3 days later, the Halloway household had returned to its usual rhythm of cold opulence. The storm had passed, leaving Boston blanketed in white. Inside the study, the family lawyer, Mr. Silas Thorne, of the prestigious firm Thorne Weathers and Associates, sat across from Beatrice and Preston. "It's done then?" Beatrice asked, sipping her morning tea. "She's gone. We haven't been able to locate her at any of the local shelters or motels," Silas said, adjusting his glasses. He was a weaselly man, known for finding loopholes that destroyed lives. "But she did sign the separation papers you left in her room the week prior. She mailed them back yesterday, postmarked from a generic box in New York." "New York, good. Far enough away to be irrelevant," Preston muttered, scrolling on his phone. He was texting Charlene. "However," Silas said, pausing, he pulled a document from his briefcase. "There is a anomaly." Beatrice frowned. "What anomaly?" It was a standard waiver. She leaves with nothing, we keep everything. Yes, Silas said slowly. But if you recall, Beatrice, you insisted on adding the total severance clause. Paragraph 14, Section B. Of course I did, Beatrice said haughtily. I wanted to ensure that if she ever came into money lottery inheritance, whatever she couldn't claim, we owed her back support, and conversely we owe her nothing. A clean break, total financial independence. Correct, Silas said. But the wording you insisted on was both parties hereby waive all rights to inquire into claim or benefit from any assets, trusts, or holdings present or future held by the other party, regardless of value or origin. So, Preston asked, looking up. She has no assets. We have the assets. This protects us. Usually, yes, Silas said, wiping sweat from his forehead. But when the papers came back, they were countersigned not by a public defender, but by a witnessing notary from the Obsidian Group. Beatrice froze. The teacup rattled in its saucer. The Obsidian Group. That's the private legal arm of the Davenport Trust. They handle billionaires, Silas, not baristas. Why would she have access to a Davenport notary? Preston asked, confused. I don't know, Silas admitted. But because you insisted on the total severance clause, if she does have something, you just legally waived your right to touch a penny of it. And more importantly, you waived your right to challenge the custody based on financial instability. If she has Davenport money backing her, you can't claim she's too poor to raise the twins. She doesn't have money, Beatrice snapped, standing up. She was begging for a coat, Silas. It's probably just a coincidence. Maybe she's sleeping with a notary. Perhaps, Silas said, sliding the paper across the desk. But there is one more thing. She left a note attached to the signature page. Preston reached out and took the small, cream-colored card. It wasn't written in the shaky, tearful handwriting he expected. It was written in elegant, sharp calligraphy. It read, "You wanted a clean break, you have it. Enjoy the silence, Preston. It will be the most expensive of your life." She's bluffing, Preston scoffed, tearing the note in half. She's trying to scare us. She's probably in a shelter in Queens right now, eating soup. Beatrice stared at the torn paper. A seed of unease planted itself in her gut, but her arrogance quickly smothered it. Focus on the merger, Preston. Charlene is coming for dinner tonight. Forget the girl. She is history. But unbeknownst to them, 300 miles away in Manhattan, a very different scene was unfolding. Vivienne sat in the penthouse suite of the Plaza Hotel. The room was warm, filled with the scent of fresh lilies. A team of doctors was setting up a private monitoring station in the corner. Sitting opposite her was an older man, with silver hair and a sharp, kind face. This was Arthur Penhaligon, the executor of the Davenport estate. "Are you sure about this, Vivienne?" Penhaligon asked softly. "Once we activate the trust, your anonymity is gone. The press will know Jonathan Davenport had a daughter. The world will know." Vivienne rested her hand on her stomach. She felt stronger now. The fear of the snowy night was replaced by a cold, burning purpose. "Not yet, Arthur," she said. "Keep my name out of the papers for 5 years. Use the shell companies, Vanguard Holdings, Nebula Ventures. Build the portfolio. Let the Halloways think I'm dead or destitute." "And the Halloways?" Penhaligon asked. "We could crush them tomorrow, buy their debt, foreclose on their home." "No." Vivienne shook her head. "That's too fast. I want them to struggle. I want them to feel the walls closing in. I want them to bleed slowly, thinking it's just bad luck." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the glittering expanse of Central Park. "When I come for them," Vivian said, her voice steel. "I want them to come to me. I want them to beg." 5 years. Penhaligon nodded, making a note. "And the twins. They will be raised as Davenports," Vivian said. "They will be kings, and they will never know the name Halloway until I say so." 5 years is a long time in the world of business. It is enough time to build an empire and more than enough time to destroy one. For Preston Halloway, the last 5 years had been a slow, suffocating descent into a hell of his own making. The merger with the Croft family, the lifeline his mother Beatrice had orchestrated, had turned into a noose. Charlene Croft was not just a wife. She was a warden. It was a rainy Tuesday in November, when the cracks in the Halloway facade became impossible to ignore. Preston sat in his office at Halloway Textiles, staring at a spreadsheet that bled red ink. The company was hemorrhaging money. "We lost the contract with the Italian distributors," Preston said, rubbing his temples. He looked 5 years older. His hairline was receding, and the spark in his eyes had been replaced by a permanent look of exhaustion. Across the desk, his mother, Beatrice, sat. She was still impeccable in her Chanel suit, but her hands trembled slightly when she reached for her water. The stress was eating her alive, though she would never admit it. "How could we lose the Italians?" Beatrice snapped. "We've supplied them for 30 years. "They found a new supplier," Preston said, tossing the file onto the desk. "A company called Vanguard Holdings. They undercut our prices by 20% and offered higher quality fabric. Same thing that happened with the French contract last year, and the Japanese deal the year before." "Who is this Vanguard?" Beatrice demanded, slamming her hand on the mahogany. "They came out of nowhere 3 years ago, and they are systematically dismantling us. I want you to sue them for something predatory pricing." "We can't afford a lawyer, Mother," Preston said quietly. "Silas Thorne won't take our calls until we pay his retainer. And Charlene is threatening to pull her father's investment if I don't buy her that villa in Tuscany." At the mention of Charlene, the office door swung open. Charlene Halloway walked in, not bothering to knock. She was beautiful, sharp-featured, and dressed in clothes that cost more than the annual salary of the factory workers they had just laid off. "Preston, the credit card was declined at Saks," she announced, throwing a black card onto his desk. "Fix it. I have a gala to attend next week, and I have nothing to wear." "Charlene, we need to talk about the budget." Preston began, his voice weary. "The company is... I don't care about your little loom factory." Charlene sneered, checking her nails. "My father put $5 million into this sinking ship. If I can't even buy a pair of shoes, maybe I should tell Daddy to call in the loan." Beatrice stiffened. "Now, Charlene, there is no need for threats. It's just a cash flow issue." "Fix it," Charlene repeated, turning on her heel. "Or I leave, and I take the money with me." As the door clicked shut, silence descended on the room. Preston put his head in his hands. He thought about the twins. He did this often, usually after a fight with Charlene. They would be 5 now, he thought. Boys. Do they look like me? He had tried to find them once a year after the divorce. He had hired a private investigator to look for Vivian Clark. The PI had found nothing. No death certificate, no tax records, no address. It was as if she had stepped off the edge of the earth. "She's probably dead," Beatrice said, reading his mind. "And good riddance. If she were alive, she would have come begging by now." But Vivian was very much alive. 3,000 miles away, in a glass-walled office, overlooking the San Francisco Bay, Vivian Davenport stood watching the sunset. She looked nothing like the woman who had shivered in the snow. Her hair was cut in a sharp, chic bob. She wore a tailored white suit that radiated authority. Behind her, 2 5-year-old boys were playing with a high-tech architectural model on the floor. "Look, Mom, I built a bridge," Leo shouted, holding up a piece of plastic. "I helped," Orion added, meticulously placing a car on the track. Vivian turned her face, softening into a smile that the business world rarely saw. She knelt down and hugged them both. "It's beautiful. You two are going to be better builders than I ever was." Arthur Penhaligon, now older, but still sharp, entered the room holding a tablet. The Halloway stock just dipped below $10 a share. Arthur reported a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Vanguard's acquisition of their debt is complete. Technically, Vivian, you own their mortgage. You own their factory. You own the chair Beatrice sits on. Vivian stood up, her expression hardening. Do they know? Not yet. They think Vanguard is just a faceless conglomerate. Good, Vivian said. Let them sweat a little longer. How is the preparation for the launch? The Nebula Gala is set for next Saturday in Boston, Arthur said. It will be the official unveiling of you as the CEO of Vanguard and the heir to the Davenport fortune. The press list is curated. The security is tight. And the invitation? Vivian asked. Arthur pulled a heavy velvet-lined envelope from his folder. It was black with gold embossing. Ready to be couriered to the Halloway estate. Vivian took the invitation. She ran her thumb over the gold letters. 5 years, she whispered. I learned how to run a company. I learned how to be a mother. And I learned how to wait. Are you sure you want to do this, Vivian? Arthur asked gently. Once you walk into that room, there is no going back. They will try to destroy you again. Vivian looked at Leo and Orion, who were laughing as they crashed their toy cars. They can try, she said, her eyes flashing cold. But last time I was alone. This time I'm holding all the cards. Send it, Arthur. It's time to go home. The envelope arrived at the Halloway mansion on a Thursday morning, delivered not by the mailman, but by a private courier in a black sedan. Arthur the butler, who had aged significantly, and now walked with a limp, brought it to the breakfast table on a silver tray. The atmosphere at breakfast was toxic. Charlene was scrolling through Instagram, ignoring her cold eggs. Preston was reading the bankruptcy notices in the paper. Beatrice was staring out the window at the overgrown garden they could no longer afford to maintain. A package, madame, Arthur said, placing the heavy black envelope in front of Beatrice. Beatrice frowned. She picked it up. It's heavy. Is this a summons? Open it, Preston muttered. Maybe it's a foreclosure notice on the house. Beatrice broke the wax seal, a stylized V. She pulled out a card made of thick metallic paper. As she read it, her eyebrows shot up. It's an invitation, she breathed, to the Nebula Gala. Charlene looked up, her interest piqued. The Nebula Gala. Are you joking? That's the most exclusive event of the year. I read about it in Vogue. The CEO of Vanguard Holdings is finally revealing their identity. They say the goodie bag alone is worth $50,000. Vanguard. Preston sat up straighter. That's the company that's been killing us. Why would they invite us? Beatrice scanned the card. Listen to this. Mr. and Mrs. Preston Halloway and Mrs. Beatrice Halloway. You are cordially invited to an evening of revelation and reconciliation. Join us at the Boston Public Library Grand Hall. Black tie. Reconciliation. Preston frowned. What does that mean? Maybe they want to buy us out. Of course they do. Beatrice's eyes lit up with a manic hope. They know we're the old guard. They respect the Halloway name. They've crushed us enough to lower the price, and now they want to acquire us. This is it, Preston. This is our exit strategy. Charlene snatched the invitation. I don't care about the strategy. I care that everyone who matters will be there. We have to go. And we have to look rich. We aren't rich, Charlene, Preston snapped. We have zero liquidity. Then sell something, Charlene yelled. Sell the silver tell your mother's pearls. I am not walking into the event of the decade wearing last season's Prada. For the next 3 days, the Halloway house was a flurry of desperate activity. Beatrice quietly sold a Renoir painting that had been in the family for 3 generations to a pawn shop for a fraction of its value. Preston took out a high-interest payday loan just to rent a limousine. They needed to keep up appearances. They needed to look like players. On the night of the gala, the Boston Public Library was transformed. Spotlights swept the sky. A red carpet was rolled out, flanked by hundreds of paparazzi. Limousines lined up around the block, depositing senators, tech billionaires, and Hollywood stars. The Halloway limo pulled up. Preston adjusted his tuxedo, his stomach churning with anxiety. Beatrice wore her emeralds, the only things she hadn't sold, holding her head high. Charlene dazzled in a gold sequined gown, posing for cameras that were mostly pointing at the movie star behind her. Chin up, Preston, Beatrice hissed as they walked up the stairs. We are Halloways. Act like you own the place. They entered the grand hall and were instantly struck by the scale of the wealth on display. The room was bathed in deep violet and gold light. Aerial acrobats hung from silk ropes from the ceiling. A fountain in the center of the room flowed with high-end champagne. My God, Preston whispered, Vanguard must be worth billions. And tonight we make a deal with them. Beatrice said, her eyes scanning the room for the VIP section. They mingled, but the reception was frosty. The Boston elite knew the Halloways were sinking. People politely excused themselves when Beatrice approached. They're avoiding us, Preston said, taking a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. They know we're broke. Don't be stupid, Charlene said, scanning the crowd. Oh, look, there's the VIP cordon. That's where the CEO will be. She started pushing her way toward the raised platform at the end of the hall, dragging Preston. Beatrice followed. Near the front of the stage, 2 small boys in miniature tuxedos were running around, weaving through the legs of the guests, laughing. One of them, a boy with messy dark hair, accidentally bumped into Charlene, spilling a drop of juice on her gold dress. Hey! Charlene shrieked, grabbing the boy by the arm. Watch where you're going, you little brat! Look what you did to my dress! The music in the immediate area seemed to stop. The boy looked up at her, not with fear, but with a confused curiosity. He had bright green eyes. I'm sorry, the boy said. I tripped. Sorry doesn't pay for couture, Charlene hissed. Where are your parents? Probably the help running around unsupervised. Preston looked down at the boy. A strange jolt of electricity went through him. The boy's eyes. They were the same shade of green as his own, and the shape of his chin. Charlene let him go. Preston said, his voice shaking. No, I want his parents to pay for dry cleaning, Charlene snapped. Suddenly a man in a black suit, Arthur Penhaligon, stepped out of the shadows. He looked at Charlene's hand on the boy's arm, with a gaze so withering, she instinctively let go. Is there a problem, Mrs. Halloway? Arthur asked smoothly. Beatrice gasped. Arthur? You work here. I thought you retired from the Davenport Trust. I serve the CEO of Vanguard, Arthur said coldly, and I suggest you do not manhandle the host's children. The host's children? Charlene stammered, stepping back. The boy brushed off his jacket. "It's okay, Arthur. She's just grumpy." The boy ran off to join his twin brother near the stairs. "Arthur," Beatrice said, her voice trembling. "Who is the CEO? We received an invitation. We are here to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Arthur chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You are here because she wanted you here. Take your seats. The presentation is starting." The lights in the grand hall dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd of 500 guests. A spotlight hit the center stage. A voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and CEO of Vanguard Holdings, Ms. Vivian Davenport." Beatrice froze. Jonathan Davenport had no children. Preston's heart stopped. Vivian. The name echoed in his skull. The curtains parted. Walking out onto the stage was a woman of breathtaking beauty and power. She wore a midnight blue gown that seemed to shimmer like the night sky. She walked with a confidence that commanded the entire room. Her face was projected onto massive screens behind her. It was her. It was the woman they had thrown out into the snow. The barista. The charity case. But she wasn't shivering anymore. She was looking directly into the camera, and Preston felt her gaze burn right through the screen, straight into his soul. "Good evening," Vivian spoke, her voice amplified, crisp and clear. "5 years ago, I started this company with a simple mission to rebuild what was broken. Many of you know the name Davenport, but few of you knew that my father, Jonathan, left his legacy to me." A collective gasp went through the room. Vivian continued, her eyes scanning the front row until they locked on to the Halloways. Beatrice looked like she was having a stroke. Charlene's mouth was hanging open. Preston looked like a ghost. "I learned a lot about business in the last 5 years," Vivian said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "I learned that loyalty is rare. I learned that family is not always blood. And I learned that sometimes to build a future, you have to buy up the past." She clicked a remote in her hand. The screen behind her changed. It showed a list of companies acquired by Vanguard, Global Tech, Aeroshipping, Halloway Textiles. The room murmured. "That's right," Vivian said, her voice dropping an octave. "As of this morning, Vanguard Holdings has acquired 51% of the outstanding debt and shares of Halloway Textiles. We are now the majority owners." She looked directly at Preston, who was trembling. "And I have some significant changes to make to the management." Vivian paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the terror set in. "But first," she said, gesturing to the side of the stage, "I'd like you to meet my vice presidents, my sons." Leo and Orion walked out, holding hands, waving to the crowd. They stood next to their mother. "Meet Leo and Orion. Davenport," Vivian announced. Preston stared at the boys, his boys, standing next to the woman he discarded, bathed in the applause of billionaires owning the company he had destroyed. Vivian raised her glass. "To new beginnings, and to settling old debts." The crowd erupted in cheers, but in the center of the room, the Halloway family stood in a bubble of silence, the traps snapping shut around their necks with a deafening click. The applause eventually died down, but the ringing in Preston Halloway's ears did not. He felt nauseous. The ballroom, once a symbol of opportunity, now felt like a cage. "We have to leave," Preston stammered, grabbing his mother's elbow. "We have to go before she sees us." "Don't be a coward," Beatrice hissed, shaking him off. Her face was pale, but her eyes were manic. "She just admitted she owns our company, Preston." "She owns us." Do you know what this means? She is a Davenport. Those boys, my grandsons, are heirs to a fortune bigger than the Croft and Halloway estates combined. We aren't leaving. We are going to that VIP lounge, and we are going to claim our family. She hates us, Mother, Preston whispered harshly. You threw her in the snow. I did what was necessary for the family at the time, Beatrice said, straightening her emerald necklace. She's a businesswoman now. She'll understand pragmatism. Besides, she can't keep a father from his children. The courts will eat her alive. I'm coming too, Charlene said, her eyes narrowing. She had recovered from her shock and was now calculating her potential alimony. If he has kids with a billionaire that affects our assets, I want to hear this. They pushed their way toward the velvet ropes guarding the VIP section. A massive security guard with a headset stepped in their path. Name, the guard grunted. Beatrice Halloway, she announced imperiously. I am the grandmother of the hosts. The guard touched his earpiece. He listened for a moment, his face impassive. Then he looked down at them with a smirk. Ms. Davenport is expecting you. Go right in. The VIP lounge was quieter, insulated from the noise of the party by thick glass. Vivienne sat on a plush velvet sofa, sipping sparkling water. Arthur Penhaligon stood behind her, like a sentinel. The twins were gone, likely whisked away to safety. Vivienne didn't stand up when they entered. She didn't smile. She simply gestured to the 3 empty chairs opposite her. Please, she said, her voice cool and smooth, like polished glass. Sit. Beatrice took the lead, sitting down and forcing a warm, grandmotherly smile. Vivienne, darling, you look magnificent. Truly. I always knew you had a certain spark. Cut the act, Beatrice, Vivienne said, bored. You have 5 minutes before I have security throw you out. Use them wisely. Now see here. Preston started finding a shred of courage. You can't just spring this on us. You disappeared. I looked for you. You looked for a week, Vivienne corrected him. And then you went to Saint-Tropez with Charlene. I saw the Instagram posts. I didn't know about the money, Preston pleaded. If I had known who you were. And that Vivienne interrupted, leaning forward, her eyes darkening. Is exactly the problem. If you had known I was a Davenport, you would have treated me like a queen. But because you thought I was a nobody, you treated me like garbage. That is why you are here, Preston. Not because of what you did, but because of who you are. We're family, Beatrice interjected, her voice trembling slightly. Those boys, Leo and Orion, they are Halloways. You cannot deny them their heritage. Vivienne laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Their heritage, you mean the heritage of bankruptcy, the heritage of a grandmother who evicts pregnant women in blizzards. I want a paternity test, Beatrice demanded, dropping the mask. We have rights, grandparents' rights. If those are Preston's sons, we are entitled to visitation. And since you own our company now, it would be in your best interest to keep this amicable, or we will drag you through the tabloids as a woman who stole children from their loving father. Vivienne looked at Arthur. Arthur, the document. Arthur placed a single sheet of paper on the table. It was the separation agreement Preston had signed 5 years ago. Read the highlighted section, Vivienne said. Preston squinted at the paper. The undersigned party, Preston Halloway, hereby waives all future claims of paternity custody or visitation regarding any children born to Vivienne Clark in exchange for the termination of spousal support. You sold your sons for $10,000 and a clean break, Vivian said softly. You signed it, Preston. A notarized waiver of paternity. In the eyes of the law, you are a stranger to them. I didn't read it, Preston whispered, his face turning ashen. Silas just told me to sign. Silas works for me now, Vivian revealed, delivering the blow with a smile. He has for 3 years. Beatrice gasped. You poached our lawyer. I bought him, just like I bought your debt. Vivian stood up, smoothing her dress. And speaking of your debt, as the majority shareholder of Halloway Textiles, I have reviewed the staffing requirements. She looked at Preston. You're fired, Preston. Effective immediately. You are removed as CEO. Your company car has already been towed from the parking lot. She looked at Beatrice. And you, Beatrice. You are removed from the board of directors. Your stipend is cancelled. You can't do this, Charlene shrieked. We have bills. We have a mortgage. Ah, the mortgage. Vivian tapped her chin. Vanguard acquired the note on the Beacon Hill estate last month. You're 3 months behind on payments. I'm initiating foreclosure proceedings tomorrow morning. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. Beatrice clutched her chest, her face turning a terrifying shade of grey. You would put us on the street, like beggars. Vivian walked up to Beatrice, leaning in close so only she could hear. No, Beatrice, not like beggars, like me. I'm giving you exactly what you gave me, a coat, a door, and the cold. Vivian turned her back on them. Arthur, remove them, and make sure the photographers get a good shot of the Halloways being escorted out by security. Vivian, Preston screamed, as 2 guards grabbed his arms. They're my sons. Please. Vivian didn't look back. She just watched the rain hitting the window the same way she had 5 years ago. But this time she was warm. The fallout was swift and brutal. The photo of Preston Halloway being physically dragged out of the Nebula Gala made the front page of the Boston Globe the next morning. The headline read, Empire lost, Halloways ousted by secret heiress. By noon, the Halloway name, once a golden ticket in Boston society, was mud. Inside the mansion on Beacon Hill, the silence was replaced by the chaotic noise of packing tape and shouting. Charlene was in the master bedroom throwing designer clothes into Louis Vuitton trunks. She wasn't packing for them. She was packing for herself. Preston sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. Charlene, please. We can fight this. We can appeal the foreclosure. With what money, Preston? Charlene snapped, zipping a bag shut. You're unemployed. Your mother is catatonic in the guest room. And you signed away your rights to the only leverage we had those kids. I love you, Preston said weakly. Charlene stopped. She looked at him with a look of pure pity and disgust. I loved the lifestyle, Preston. I loved the Halloway name. But you aren't a Halloway anymore. You're a joke. My father warned me you were weak. I should have listened. She signaled to the chauffeur she had hired with the last of the joint accounts funds. Take these to the Croft estate. You're leaving me. Preston stood up, panic setting in. Now, when I have nothing, because you have nothing, Charlene said coldly. She pulled off her wedding ring, a 3-carat diamond, and looked at it. Then she slipped it into her purse. I'll keep this, for pain and suffering. She walked out. The front door slammed. Preston was alone. He walked down the hall to his mother's room. Beatrice was sitting in her armchair, staring at the wall. She hadn't spoken since they left the gala. The doctor said it was a stress-induced fugue state. She had finally encountered a problem she couldn't bully her way out of, and her mind had simply shut down. Mother, Preston asked gently, we have to go. The movers are coming tomorrow to take the furniture for the auction. Beatrice didn't blink. She just muttered, "The snow. It was so deep." Preston felt a sob rise in his throat. He had lost his wife. He had lost his company. He was losing his home. And the realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He deserved it. Desperate for a lifeline. Preston did the only thing he could think of. He drove his old sedan, the only car they hadn't seized, to the local park, where he knew the wealthy nannies took children in the afternoons. He had seen a photo in a magazine of Vivian walking there. He waited for 3 hours in the cold autumn wind. Finally, he saw them. Vivian was walking along the duck pond, flanked by 2 large bodyguards. Leo and Orion were running ahead, throwing bread to the ducks. Preston got out of the car. He looked disheveled. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. He wore a wrinkled coat. "Leo Orion," he called out, his voice cracking. The boys stopped. They looked at the strange, messy man waving at them. They didn't recognize him. To them, he was just a stranger. Vivian stopped. She signaled the bodyguards to hold their position, but not attack. She watched Preston approach. "Boys," Preston said, dropping to his knees on the grass so he was eye level with them. Tears streamed down his face. I'm your father." Leo, the bolder of the 2, tilted his head. "No, you're not." "I am," Preston insisted, reaching out a hand. "I made a mistake, a big mistake, but I'm here now." Orion hid behind his brother. "Mom says our dad got lost a long time ago." Preston looked up at Vivian. She stood 10 feet away, an impenetrable statue of grace and judgment. "Tell them, Vivian," Preston begged. "Please, just let me have this." Vivian walked over. She placed a protective hand on each of the boys' shoulders. "Preston," she said quietly, "being a father isn't about biology. It's about showing up. It's about protection. You didn't protect them when they were inside me. You didn't protect them when they were born. You don't get to claim them now just because you're lonely." "I have nothing left," Preston cried, breaking down in front of his sons. "I have nothing." Leo looked at his mother, confused. "Mum, why is the man crying?" "Because he is very sad, Leo," Vivian said gently. "He lost something very important because he didn't take care of it." She looked at Preston one last time. "I will not be cruel, Preston. Unlike you, I don't enjoy suffering. I have arranged for a small apartment in South Boston. The rent is paid for 6 months. There is a job waiting for you at one of my warehouses. It's minimum wage. Stocking shelves." Preston stared at her. "You want me? A Halloway? To stock shelves?" "It's honest work," Vivian said. "More honest than anything you've done in your life. Take it or freeze. The choice is yours." "Come on, boys," she said, turning them away. "Let's go get hot chocolate." "Bye, sad man," Orion waved innocently. Preston knelt in the mud, watching them walk away. He watched the family he could have had, the fortune he could have shared, and the love he had thrown away disappear into the distance. He stayed there until the sun went down, realizing that the cold he felt now would last forever. 5 years later. The warehouse of Vanguard Logistics in South Boston was a cavernous, drafty building. It smelled of cardboard diesel fumes and sweat. It was a far cry from the mahogany-paneled offices of Halloway Textiles, but it was the only world Preston Halloway knew anymore. At 5:00 p.m. the buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the shift. Preston wiped his greasy hands on his coveralls. At 40 years old, he looked 50. His back was permanently stooped from lifting heavy crates, and his once handsome face was lined with deep grooves of fatigue. "Hey, Halloway," the shift manager, a man named Rick, who used to be a janitor at Preston's old factory, shouted. "You're on clean-up duty tonight. Someone spilled hydraulic fluid in aisle 4. "Sure, Rick," Preston muttered, keeping his head down. "I'm on it." He didn't argue. He didn't demand respect. He had learned the hard way that respect was something you earned, not something you inherited. After his shift, Preston walked the 6 blocks to the cramped one-bedroom apartment he shared with his mother. The walk was cold. Another Boston winter was setting in, but his coat was thick. He had bought it at a thrift store. It wasn't cashmere, but it was warm. He unlocked the door to apartment 4B. The smell of boiled cabbage and old medicine hit him. "Preston, is that you?" A frail voice called from the living room. Beatrice Halloway sat in a recliner that had seen better days, staring at a small television set. She was a shell of the woman who had once ruled Boston society. Her hair was grey and thin, and her sharp mind had dulled into a repetitive loop of bitterness and confusion. "It's me mother," Preston said, placing a bag of groceries on the counter. "I brought soup." "Did you call the lawyers?" Beatrice asked, not looking away from the TV. "Did you tell them about the mistake, the deed to the house? It must be a mistake." Preston sighed. She asked this every day. "There are no lawyers, Mother. The house is gone. It's been gone for 5 years." "Nonsense," Beatrice muttered. "I'm Beatrice Halloway. They can't touch me." Preston ignored her and sat down on the frayed sofa. On the television screen, a news segment was playing. And in business news tonight, the Woman of the Decade Award was presented to Vivian Davenport, CEO of Vanguard Holdings, for her massive donation to the Boston Children's Hospital. Preston froze. He looked at the screen. There she was. Vivian. She looked older but radiant. She was standing at a podium holding a crystal trophy. Flanking her were 2 10-year-old boys. Leo and Orion looked like princes. They wore sharp suits, standing tall and confident. Leo had Preston's jawline. Orion had his eyes. But there was a kindness in their faces that Preston realized they had gotten entirely from their mother. "I dedicate this award to my sons," Vivian said on the screen, her voice filling the small, sad apartment. "They taught me that the greatest wealth isn't money. It's the ability to care for the people you love. A lesson I hope to pass on to the next generation." Beatrice squinted at the screen. "That woman, she looks familiar. She looks like the maid we used to have." "She wasn't the maid, Mother," Preston whispered, tears pricking his eyes. "She was my wife." "Wife?" Beatrice scoffed. "Don't be silly, Preston. You married a Croft. Where is Charlene? She hasn't visited in weeks." "Charlene lives in Paris now, Mother, with her 3rd husband." Preston stared at the boys on the screen. They were smiling. They looked happy. They looked safe. He reached out his rough, dirty finger, tracing the image of the sons he would never know. He remembered the night he stood in the library and tossed a check for $10,000 at a pregnant woman. He remembered thinking he was solving a problem. He realized now that he hadn't been solving a problem. He had been throwing away a winning lottery ticket. The segment ended, replaced by a commercial for car insurance. "Turn it off," Beatrice snapped. "It's too loud." Preston turned off the TV. The room went dark. Outside, the snow began to fall, blanketing the city in white. In the penthouse of the Davenport Tower, the scene was very different. Vivian tucked the boys into bed. They were tired after the gala, but buzzing with excitement. "Mom," Leo asked, pulling the duvet up, "did you see that man today? The one outside the hotel, he was watching us." Vivian paused. She had seen Preston in the crowd, shivering in his thrift store coat, watching them get into the limousine. She had seen the regret in his eyes. "I saw him, Leo," she said softly. "He looked sad," Orion said. "Should we have helped him?" Vivian looked at her beautiful, kind-hearted boys. She had raised them well. They had empathy, something the Halloways had never possessed. "We did help him, Orion," Vivian said, kissing his forehead. "We taught him a lesson, and sometimes learning is the hardest thing a person can do." She walked to the window of the penthouse. The city lights of Boston glittered below her like a sea of diamonds. She had won. She had the fortune, the power, and the family. But as she looked out at the falling snow, she didn't feel the need for vengeance anymore. The fire that had fueled her for so long had settled into a warm, steady glow. She had proven that you can be kicked out into the cold, but if you carry enough fire inside you, you can burn the whole world down and build a better one from the ashes. Vivian turned off the light. "Good night, my loves," she whispered. And for the first time in a decade, the winter didn't feel cold at all. And that is the story of Vivian Clark and the Halloway family. It's a brutal reminder that karma has no deadline. Beatrice and Preston thought that power and money gave them the right to treat people like trash. They measured Vivian's worth by the clothes on her back, never realizing that the true value of a person lies in their character, and sometimes in their secret bank account. Preston spent the rest of his life stocking shelves, haunted by the image of the sons he sold for a clean break. It serves as a powerful lesson for all of us. Be careful who you step on while you're climbing the ladder, because you might just meet them on your way down. Now I want to hear from you. Did Vivian go too far? Was leaving them destitute and homeless justified revenge? Or should she have shown them mercy for the sake of the children? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about betrayal, revenge, and hidden fortunes, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, the wheel always turns.